You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by listeners like you, supporters on Patreon. Join us today at patreon.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 451, Learning Curve.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we do our best to be good students and learn all that we can from an episode of Star Trek, picking it apart for morals, meanings, and messages that we can take with us for the rest of our lives.
Today, it's Learning Curve, the one where Tuvok takes charge of some students who do not want to learn what he's teaching.
We will get back to Learning Curve in a moment, right after I let all of you know how you can stay in touch with all of us. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Twitter and Facebook at MissionLogPod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now, here's John Champion to learn us on some trivia.
All right, today's episode, Learning Curve, was written by Ronald Wilkerson and Jean-Louise Matthias. All right, think way back to those days of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and we saw the combined names of this writing team a total of 4 times. Let's see, there was Imaginary Friend, there was Schisms, there was Lessons, and most thematically connected, maybe, there was Lower Decks. As Voyager ramped up production, Ronald and Gene sent in a few pitches, and they even had a story that was heavily focused on Neelix, but along came Jetrel, and their story then took the back seat while Jetrel was pushed into production. Still, they had a story in which the B-plot included some of the crew who didn't fit in, and they loved the idea of exploring this dynamic with the remaining Maquis. The producers liked it too. In fact, they liked it so much that they moved that up to the A-plot and gave them the go-ahead. Gene will be credited with 1 more Voyager episode and Ronald with 3 more. The episode was directed by David Livingston, and this is one of those critical decisions about a director for an episode. You have a guest cast, you have a bottle show, you have a season about to wrap. Now, David has directed so much Star Trek that he's one of the most reliable assets to the production, and he was given the orders to turn this one in absolutely on time and on budget. And that's just the kind of thing that he can do. It is a bottle show, but David was able to cut even more corners, doing things like, and watch for this in the episode, in totally different scenes, leaving the camera setups exactly in place and just shooting multiple takes for entirely different scenes. So all that stuff in the Jeffries tubes and with the ladders, those are just all the same setup, didn't even have to move the camera. Now, this episode, oddly enough, has the highest Nielsen rating for a Voyager season ender in the series' original run. And very importantly, and probably will affect a bit of our conversation today, this was not intended as the season ender. In fact, 4 more episodes were shot for season 1 and then moved to season 2. Now, let's talk about our very big lineup of guest stars today. Let's see here. Our guest stars are our Maquis crew, primarily learning to adapt to Starfleet life under Tuvok's tutelage. There's a band name for you. There's the Bolian, Chell, played here by Derek McGrath. And Derek is one of those actors who is constantly working across mediums and across genres, getting his start way back in the early 70s. He's had recurring roles on Cheers, Dallas, and a number of other shows. He has lent his voice talent to cartoons, games, and features. He even did so as Chief Quimby on Inspector Gadget for 2 full seasons. And don't think that we've seen the last of this particular Bolian. He'll be back for 1 more episode of Voyager in the same role, and Chell even turns up in the video game Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. There's the Bajoran Garon, played by Kenny Morrison. Now, Kenny got his start young. He was a child actor with his first on-screen professional roles popping up when he was about 13 years old. He was only 21 when this episode was made. In addition to the usual sitcom appearances, he is one of the stars of 1990's The Never-Ending Story Part 2. He also added director credits to his work starting in the late 90s, and most of his professional credits in the business wrap up around 2010. And 2 humans are in the group. The first is Henley, played by Catherine McNeil. Now, you could find Catherine popping up all over soaps starting in the 80s with daytime dramas like The Young and the Restless, and later on Days of Our Lives, to nighttime shows like Knots Landing. TV and film roles fill out her resume, and while this is her only on-screen Trek appearance, she does provide a voice in the video game Star Trek Klingon. And then there's Armand Schultz in the role of Dalby. While he got his start in soap operas as well, and has made the rounds in TV guest star roles, he has also amassed a number of feature film appearances. Burn After Reading, Vanilla Sky, The Happening, and much more. He has also done more than a few voice roles in Star Wars video games. This is his only Star Trek appearance. And by the way, there are 2 kids at the very top of the show. That's Lindsay Hahn as Beatrice, making her first of 3 appearances on Voyager. As a child actor, she worked a lot, and then she turns up later in her career in longer stints on True Blood and Such a Small World. And young Henry Burley, well, that is none other than Thomas Dekker. Recently, he's been a regular on Swimming with Sharks, but he probably first gained prominence with a recurring role on Heroes. And after that, sci-fi audiences may also know him from the unfortunately short-lived TV series Terminator, The Sarah Connor Chronicles. But this isn't the last of his Trek appearances, nor is it the first. The year before this episode, an even younger Thomas Dekker was in the Nexus as Picard's kid in Star Trek Generations.
Warning, we are fresh out of Chakotay. This episode contains only spicy Chakotay.
Prologue. It's a big day in Captain Janeway's holonovel, where she's the governess of some precocious, humorless, holographic children. But we'll give them a break since they're dealing with the loss of their holographic mother. They try to get the upper hand, but Janeway holds her own, briefly. The program is interrupted when the kids vanish, and it appears to be some kind of energy fluctuation on the ship. In a corridor, Tuvok finds crewman Dalby making some unauthorized repairs to the bioneural gel packs, and that doesn't sit well with the Vulcan, who reminds the former Maquis crewman that repairs need to go through the right protocols. Dalby snaps back that he does things his way, and if Tuvok has a problem with it, then he can toss him in the brig. Act 1. While the engineering team tries to figure out what's wrong with the gel packs and figure out a temporary replacement, Tuvok brings Janeway and Chakotay up to speed on Dalby and some other Maquis crew members who just aren't fitting in. Stands to reason, since they aren't Starfleet, but here they are now on a Starfleet ship. Cool, you've got the job then, Tuvok, to give them a crash course in how to be part of a Starfleet crew. He meets his students, Dalby again, plus another human, Henley, a Bolian named Chell, and a surly young Bajoran named Garon. Tuvok comes in strong with the charge that he'll get them up to Starfleet standards, but as soon as the backtalk starts, he's got Chell running laps. The others can't put up with it, and Dalby has them all walking out, leaving Tuvok a bit perplexed in his own unemotional Vulcan way. Later, the Maquis crew convene in the mess hall to talk over their plans. They'll do their jobs, but they are not going in for any of these stuck-up Starfleet rules. Chakotay joins them to get their side of the story, and Dalby speaks for them all when he says that they may be on a Starfleet ship, but they'll continue to do things the Maquis way. At which point, Chakotay straight up punches Dalby in the face, knocking him to the floor. That's also how the Maquis do things. So he can have it his way, or he and the others can shape up and start acting like a Starfleet crew when they see Tuvok the next time. Act 2. The next time brings the cadets in front of Tuvok for his uniform review. They don't all pass, but they are dismissed until later that evening for something TBA. In the meantime, Dalby airs his grievances to fellow former Maquis B'Elanna Torres, but her advice amounts to suck it up, prove you can actually do what's wanted from you. There's another failure with the bioneural gel packs, though. This time, B'Elanna takes it to sickbay, where the doctor and Kes run a scan. Indeed, the biological component of it is infected, but they don't know how or with what, only that it is contagious but harmless to the crew. They'll need to isolate the packs and run tests to figure it out. At the appointed hour, the Maquis crew meet up with Tuvok, who has an activity for them, a 10K run through the ship, starting with about 50 Jeffries tubes, a pass through the mess hall. It's great if you like climbing, sweating, and carrying things on your back, with your fellow crew members looking on with amusement. Tuvok judges the group on their performance, even though he increased the gravity on one of the decks by 10% to give them an extra challenge. Garon and Chell still have to finish laps, and they'll do it all again the next night when Tuvok expects an improvement. Act 3. The next day, B'Elanna and Harry Kim look through transporter logs for anything suspicious. The only recent transports were some food items Neelix had brought up from a planet, but nothing out of the ordinary. On the transporter pad, though, is poor Chell, using a micro-resonator to degauss the entire room, another of Tuvok's assigned tasks, and the equivalent of scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush. Chell has something else to do, though, when he's reunited with his Maquis crew in the next of Tuvok's training tasks. They're all on a recreation of the Voyager bridge in the holodeck in a test, and stop me if you've heard this one before, where they have to act as a command crew responding to a distress call that turns out to be an enemy attack. They fail the simulation, but they also fail to learn the lesson that Tuvok has to spell out for them, that sometimes the best action to take is a retreat to protect your crew and maintain tactical advantage. They're defeated and humiliated. Tuvok retreats to the mess hall, where Neelix immediately sizes up that something is on Mr. Vulcan's mind, and he's got just the metaphor to help explain what's going on. There's this flower that has a flexible stem, but every now and then, there's one that comes along that's inflexible and just breaks. Tuvok totally gets it. His cadets are inflexible. No, Mr. Vulcan, you are the one who has the inflexible stem. So, bend a little. You can't treat the Maquis crew as if they are already Starfleet. Neelix returns to his kitchen to add some disgusting-looking cheese to a pot full of something that is definitely not macaroni when Tuvok notices its foul odor. The cheese is homemade from some milk that they recently beamed up. Cheese has to be made from bacteria, and the kitchen is right below a ventilation system that connects to the rest of the ship. Act 4. So guess what's causing all those bioneural gel packs to get sick? The bacteria flowed through the air system, and now the cheese is in a containment field to be examined by the doctor, and Neelix feels awful about it. Meanwhile, Tuvok does his best to reach Dalby one-on-one, a little hangout time between a couple of buds. Some pool, some small talk. It's not going well. Tuvok isn't exactly winning over Dalby, who it seems has been walking around with a chip on his shoulder for a very long time. It does reveal, though, that Dalby is protective over Garon, and Chakotay and Tuvok see promise in him. The doctor and Kes continue working on the problem. They may have a breakthrough, surmising that the gel packs are actually infected by a virus that was carried by the offending bacteria. They better work fast, though. Ship systems, including life support, are failing left and right. What's more, Tuvok and his trainees are stuck in a cargo bay, and neither the doors nor communications are working. Act 5. Things are looking bad all over Voyager, until the Doctor has a breakthrough. He needs to give the ship a fever in order to root out the virus, and that's a job for engineering. B'Elanna is going to reroute she's going to invert the... it's a whole thing that she's got to tech with the tech. It's happening, though, heating up the whole ship to an uncomfortable degree. Tuvok and his crew find their situation deteriorating, too. As Voyager heats up, so do the conduits in the cargo bay. With the door controls inoperable, Garon climbs up to a control panel to try from there, while the others attempt to escape through a Jeffries tube. There's an explosion, and plasma gas leaks into the room, knocking Garon out cold. When Dalby sees what's happened, he's incensed that Tuvok won't go back for him. In Tuvok's logic, the sacrifice of the few to save the many is the logical choice. Their disagreement turns physical when Tuvok threatens to break Dalby's arm if he doesn't escape with the others, but then Tuvok seals the entrance and goes back for Garon himself. Voyager's crew is getting sweaty and miserable with the heat cranked up, and Tuvok succeeds in getting Garon down from the control panel. Well, they fall unconscious, but at least they're on the floor now. Just in time, the doctor lets the bridge know that the infection has been killed, and they can turn the AC back on. This, right at the same time the rest of the cadets force their way into the cargo bay and drag Tuvok and Garon out. It's a moment of realization for Dalby that if Tuvok can bend the rules enough to pull this off, then he and the other trainees can learn to follow them. The end.
So, folks out there, I challenge you this. 10 times. Say it with me. Bio-neural gel packs, because John shouldn't have to say that alone.
Bio-neural gel packs. See, the funny thing is that people who hear the edited version of it, see, I couldn't even say version. The people who hear the edited version of this show, they will hear me just sailing right through bio-neural gel packs like I was born to say it. The people who hear the unedited version, they will know that it took about 300 takes to get through that phrase.
That's why I want them to try, because now they know how difficult it is sometimes for us to get through our own scripts.
So you propose the BNGPs, and that might be how it goes. Kind of a throwback to the GNDN. All of you Star Trek fans, you should know what it is. And if you don't, we're not going to tell you. You got to look it up.
The GNDN in TOS, LOL, ROFL, right?
Exactly. So, yes, that is it. All right. Hey, kicking off our look at Learning Curve. Look, oh, man, I'm so happy. It's Captain Janeway back in the worst possible holodeck game for herself. But okay, I will give them this, though. There is some thematic foreshadowing, what with teaching insolent kids. You know, there's that.
We can make that work.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to have to.
I guess we do. And look, and I will give the show a shout out. I do like the early adoption of an emphasis on STEAM, that is the acronym STEAM, learning for kids, because, you know, he says like, oh, your Latin is rusty, you know, awful. And she's like, but look, I'm about to school you in physics and science and all these great things. Very, very cool. Great to see Janeway leading the charge there. But she immediately addresses Beatrice about needlework and painting. So, you know, I want to see her like, all right, Beatrice, day one, warp field theory. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to teach you something that you really need to know, right? As opposed to not need to know. I'm not going to go there. I mean, I know it's supposed to be immersion, but, sure. The kid, though, you know, there's that old rule in Hollywood, like, no kids, no animals. Right. You don't want to work with either. But the young Lord, the actor who played the young Lord, was so good at being Joffrey Baratheon. Well, I'm telling you, right?
Yes. But I mean, truly a really good actor. Thomas Dekker is no slouch, and I completely did not make that connection until I read the trivia, and I was like, oh my God, he's really good. And wow, to have yourself immortalized like that. pretty awesome. Oh, wait. I do have a question. How many Maquis are there left on Voyager? Because it seems like every week there are just more new Maquis to deal with. Yeah, are they reproducing? Is that something we don't know about the Maquis?
Are they all dancing at the head of a pin?
Maybe.
So, yes. Along with the angels.
Yeah.
Do you think that the 47 gel packs in reserve was just a little too on the nose, even for the joke 47?
Yes, 100%. And I am glad that you mentioned it because, it just stands out sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's clever. And this one, it was not.
Before Chell arrived on the scene, I like that the three Maquis that were sent to Tuvok for training, they all represented the different branches. So it was nice to have, you had sciences, you had engineering, and you had command, like all in there. Yeah. That was really cool. It was also nice just to see all the, the cosplay that was going on there. It wasn't just like all command or all engineering.
Yeah, definitely. And holy crap, Chakotay decked Dalby. I know I mentioned it in the recap, but Chakotay straight up decked him. That was quite a moment. I will have something else to say about that later, but wow.
Yeah, he southpawed him, which is nice. Yeah. As a left-hander myself, I was like, oh, that's a nice punch. And also, he kind of was doing like the whole Raker thing. Like he did like the reverse chair sit.
Yeah.
He grabbed the chair. Well, first of all, he was like, Chell, get up. Yeah. Move over there. I'm going to grab your chair.
Power move right there.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Then he did like the leg over the chair thing. Not quite Riker style, but then punch. Also, though, not to be completely downplayed, space cups.
There are space cups here, and thank you to space cups. Thank you to people in the Discord who pointed out that there are space cups. I mean, there's some space tankards. Right. I don't know exactly how they'll be categorized, but definitely a good look at those. And man, I do think that Tuvok, checking out the uniforms, he would have freaked out on the Enterprise seeing Worf with a bandolier on, or Deanna wearing whatever Deanna's wearing. Definitely not the place for him.
For everyone who's playing the home game, in case you forgot that Starfleet in any way, shape, or form is not a military organization.
Yes.
The way that Tuvok dressed down his subordinates during the inspection was very much in line with military.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I got to say, a 10K run/hike, whatever it is, on board a small starship, that would be a lot. That would just feel like a lot. I was really amused, though, when they run through the mess hall and Chell just takes a glass of water from someone. I wondered if that was improvised, because it was a good moment. But then Tuvok just sort of like hides it next to a plant by the door. Like, it was a weird choice that you didn't have somebody there to take it from him. But yeah, it was a fun little moment.
So this is the goal. The goal is, first of all, why hasn't that been cosplayed yet, like ever?
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. I sense an opportunity for us. Go ahead.
And then second of all, that's what you should do. You should run around whatever hotel or whatever convention center that you're in, grab certain drinks, and just hide them along the way.
That's it.
And then people will be like, oh, gee, those cosplayers and their 10K run.
That's it. The costumes, would require a little bit of work. Here's a bit of bonus trivia for you. The shoes are Air Jordan X models that had been kind of changed a bit. So, I'm sure you can hop on eBay and spend a couple of $1,000s to find those. So, yeah.
Literally, so the costume would cost you $1,005. $1,000 for the shoes, $5 for the actual uniform
for the gray
itself,
sweats.
Right?
Yeah.
So, John, I'm on your side about the Doctor when it comes to certain things, that he is the computer is he. So when he looks at the bioneural gel pack, or the BNGP, right?
Yep.
He goes, I've never seen one of these before. Yes, you have. You're the computer.
You're literally made by it.
Right. Exactly. You're like, you should look at it like mommy or daddy, right? You know, like, how am I going to save you? Because basically you are powering me now.
Yes. And as systems are failing, the Doctor is not failing.
He's actually the only one he's the only one who's solving the problem.
Yeah.
It's like he's getting smarter as they fail.
Wow. All right. Well, this episode just took a turn for me. Fascinating.
Here's the thing with Tuvok and his training. First of all, it's not really bolstering their spirits. It's kind of humiliating. So, what do you actually think? Now, this is like Starfleet training. I train Starfleet cadets. I whip them into shape. Thank you, Sergeant, Drill Sergeant Tuvok. Do that to Tom or Harry. See how they hold up. Right? And they are command staff. Yeah. They are on the bridge where all of the stress happens. Yeah. Put them through a 10K run.
Oh, no. Not at all.
See if they hide their drinks. Right? Yeah.
Not going to happen at all. Let's cut over to the holodeck training on the bridge simulation. Now, definitely a Kobayashi Maru thing. Obviously. Chell says that Ferengi have been known to fake a distress call in order to lure in a ship. And my question is, to what? To lure people in for a look at the gift shop? Like, what do Ferengi get out of that? I don't know.
Well, there are those action figures.
Oh, that's true. You can get
so
the
much.
entire Marauder Mo collection. That would be, maybe that's the game they're up to. And I do want to point out, nice little effect when Tuvok is standing in the bridge simulation, and it's a composite shot, because, of course, you have to do that when you go back to the arch. But he's there in the red alert lighting with some smoke, and then the lighting just changes from red to white when he resets the simulation. It's a really good little subtle thing to do where you have a blend of a practical with the composite. It's so subtle, but it just works to sell the moment.
The whole thing, the Kobayashi Maru type simulation that was happening there, I think that for Star Trek fans of a certain age, we're like, okay, we get this. This is very Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan beginning. But what I really drew me into the scene was at the end when Tuvok said, and this is much to Tim's credit, Tim Russ, who performed the line, the strongest tactical move is always the one in which you reap the highest gain at the lowest cost. It's so Vulcan.
Yeah, right.
It's so Vulcan. The only other line I think that would have been better here is the only way to win is not to play the game.
Ooh, yeah. Good call. Good call.
Right?
Yeah.
So we are war games after all. Neelix with the sick burn. Yeah. Right? Maybe it's you who are the one that's not, I'm like, that's pretty good. That was fun.
Yeah.
Nice on Ethan to do that. But watching Ethan now as Neelix, watching him deliver those lines, and after Tetrell, it makes me look differently at him now when he says these lines.
Yes, right?
Did that happen to you? Does that happen to anyone else?
It has to. And yes, it does. Because then you see that there is a depth there that, it's just a lot more going on to the character. So, again,
Exactly.
never let us forget that, because I think it's very important. All right, Norman, it's time for the best line in the episode. I think you and I both know what it is. Get the cheese to sick bay.
So good. It's so good.
And also delivered perfectly. Without irony, without a wink. It's just so good. Yeah.
I would love to talk to Roxanne about that and say, okay, what was your reaction to it after cut was said? Right?
Yes.
You're like, did I really say that line out loud?
Yeah, I know. Gotta say, I was surprised to see a shot in Chez Sandrine hang out and playing pool with Dalby. That went dark really fast.
It did.
Yeah. Like we knew what was going to happen. We knew that Tuvok would not be able to connect personally, that this was... It's like something that he read in a book and said, I'm going to go do this. I will connect personally. We are now connecting personally. We knew that it wouldn't go well, but wow. Yeah.
Right. And the thing is with that scene, like Tuvok said something and then Dalby said, this terrible thing happened. And Tuvok's like, how did that make you feel?
Yeah.
Right? It was like, I know you're trying, but I think both men in that situation knew exactly what was happening. So I don't think Dalby was giving him the benefit of the doubt neither. And Tuvok didn't really understand that there was a benefit or a doubt to be given.
Yeah.
So it was all about, if this was said, then X must be the next question.
Right.
If X is the next question and this response happened, then Y must be the next question.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
And it was just like, creepy. And also, I do love, this is the home game, anyone who plays pool around the table at Sandrine's, watch how they handle the cue stick. This guy, the actor who plays Dalby, knows how to play pool. The way he cues up his shot, the way he lines, the way he arches his back, the way he bridges his hand against the rail, the way he chalks, all that stuff. Guys played pool.
Interesting. That's cool. Now, at some point, actually twice in the episode, they floated the idea out there of using Icelandic chips at some point. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't just have some on board that they could start dropping in. They still work. All the other ships in the Federation use them. But here's the question. Did anyone think of just putting the gel packs all in the same room and heating that up while maybe some Icelandic chips just keep the air conditioning on for the rest of the ship? Like, that would have been one way to do it. Just, I know hindsight's 20/20, but if they ever run into it again, maybe they could do that.
What's up with the logic, man? Seriously.
Yeah, I
know. Why are you bringing the logic into this at all?
Yeah, it's the Vulcan in me, sorry.
Speaking of which, there was a Styles, this is going all the way back to Balance of Terror, there was an interesting Styles-Spock dynamic between Dalby and Tuvok at the end, where... yes, the ending does wrap up a little too cleanly, a la most of the 90s Trek. But there was this whole thing where Styles was saved by Spock because a phaser bank overloaded and coolant started to leak out. Now, they couldn't save Tomlinson, but they were able to save Styles in Balance of Terror. The same way that, Tuvok and Dalby had this wonderfully quick and almost not even really believable reconciliation at the end. The way, and I like the way that they handled Spock and Styles, because Styles said, like, you saved me. You saved, you put your life at risk for mine. And Spock's like, I did nothing but save, an experienced officer so that you can continue executing your function.
Yeah.
I really wanted that to happen, with those two.
Okay, well, that's the scene after they cut, Well,
of course. Yeah, we'll never get that scene.
And by the way, look, I know that we have an A plot and a B plot here, and they kind of flip positions in the script, but just once, I want to see an episode like this. I want to see it end where the A and the B plot stories don't intersect. Like, can you picture it? The rest of the crew, they're out there, they're sweaty, they're delirious, they're passing out from the heat wave, and then they finally get to check in with the cadet crew, and they're just like, yeah, we're in the holodeck ski simulation. We just what happened to you guys? We're fine here. How are you?
Would you like some alien cheese with your spicy chacote? That'll cost you extra.
We will get right back to Learning Curve in a moment, but first a word from this week's sponsor, and that sponsor is you. Specifically, all of our followers and supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/missionlog, where all of you have been able to take advantage of the community that we have there, the early and unedited episodes of Mission Log, as well as the exclusive Mission Log swag that is available to Patreon supporters. But even bigger than that is the explosive growth of our Discord community. Norman, take it away.
Discord for us, John, I think it's every time we check in, it's always something new, a new conversation, a new topic, or topics that have been, bandied around from episode to episode, all the way from the original series to all the newest episodes in Strange New Worlds to tangential science fiction from the 1950s, all the way to the 2000s, Stargate, Doctor Who, everything Jerry Anderson, which you and I love, Blake Seven. The growth and the potential growth of this group is all thanks to the group.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we've been really lucky that ever since Mission Log started, we've tried to curate a type of conversation that is about ideas around the pop culture that we are fans of. And Discord is a perfect offshoot of that and a great place to be able to check in at any time and find engaging conversation. So you've heard us talk about it here. We get emails from people saying, hey, Discord sounds great. How do I join it? Well, very easily. That's why we do this drop whenever we can in our episodes. You join it by joining Patreon, patreon.com/missionlog. And for as little as $1 a month, even with a discount, if you join for a full year, then you get all access to that and so much more. So it's patreon.com/missionlog. And Norm, I believe we have some new patrons who have joined us. Let's say hi to them.
So thank you for subscribing. Thank you for supporting what we do here to T. Ski, Stefan, Chris, Laurent, Carlos, and Corey. These are our new subscribers, and we thank you so much for believing in what we do and supporting it with your hard-earned latinum.
All right, so we will see you all there at patreon.com/missionlog and see you in the Discord. All right. I mentioned it in the last segment, and I said I'd mention it again. Let me just say straight up, violence is not the answer. Striking your coworkers is definitely never the answer. But this is TV. And Chakotay has been one of the less interesting characters up front, for me anyway. You may feel differently. Other people in the audience may feel differently. That's perfectly fine. Seeing him knock Dalby on the floor to make a point was gold. I mean, that was, I guess, help me out here, because I think if there's any way to justify it at all, it's that this is how they interacted before they got there. Now, what we don't see is that off screen, he's got to answer to Janeway as well. And Janeway's got to say, hey, you struck a crewman. And he's got to say, yeah, I did, but this is how we did things on my ship. And then she gets to say, well, you're not on your ship anymore. You know, like, there's a circular thing here that's a bit of a problem, but it was still very satisfying to watch.
We're going all the way back to something I think that has been so woefully and so underutilized, and that's Chakotay's character. At the very beginning of the entire premise of Voyager, you were going to have Janeway in command, and then you were going to have Chakotay trying to wrestle with whose loyalty is he going to support? Is he going to support the people that basically have saved his lives a dozen times over? Or is he going to kowtow to the Starfleet way, which I think, in my personal opinion, he was relegated to too quickly in this series.
Totally.
That's why you have to have a moment like this to remind people, like, Chakotay is Maquis.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So it helps. Maybe I would have felt like this scene fit more so if we got this kind of thing earlier in the series. So, and I think you and I will always come back to this place where we say, okay, this is a misplaced episode, but it is still a valuable. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but it kind of partly hinges on this scene. It's like what we get out of it is valuable. What we see of Chakotay here is valuable, but it might have been more valuable had we seen it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I could pretty much take like a lot of what I'm going to say later, clip that and say it here, but I want to bring it more of an emphasis on this later.
Yeah, sure.
Especially on Chakotay.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So what do we have here at heart, though? I mean, the heart of the episode is this sort of workplace training and techniques, education, team building, and of course there's learning happening at both ends. Tuvok and his cadets have to meet each other where they are, and you won't get anywhere just by constantly forcing people to do what you want. But I love B'Elanna's take to Dalby, and this is what I wanted more of, and I wonder why it didn't get more attention, which is it's so short, but it's so perfect. And I hope, honestly, that I can remember it for all those times in life that it is actually applicable. She just says, in other words, you're afraid that you won't make it, that you'll fail this training. That's not what I said or what I'm thinking. What? You're thinking that I can't make it through this ridiculous exercise? That's absurd. Fine, then make it through.
Reverse Psychology 101.
I know.
Right?
And it was great. It was so great, so much more effective than what Tuvok is doing. So maybe Tuvok and B'Elanna needed to have a conversation about this, but I thought it was just ideal. That should be almost the kind of thing that comes a little bit later that would snap him into place. You go like, no, this is why you're doing it. You're doing it because you can, because that's what's expected of you, I mean,
for me, again, this is misplaced episode, not necessarily because of where it falls in the structure of the story, but where it falls so far away from the events that happened in Parallax. Parallax was the episode where we really saw the Maquis being Maquis. You had Seska and another Maquis in the hallway conspiring to do Maquis things. Chakotay busts them down. He could have thrown a punch at the guy or at Seska, probably not Seska, but he said, we're doing things this way. We're going to try and make things work. And he's fighting tooth and nail, for B'Elanna because he wants B'Elanna to be able to achieve and show that the Maquis way can work. And I think that it's unfortunate that it is just so far removed from what happened in Parallax. So don't you think that this should have been addressed far earlier, just to have a little bit more of a smoother cadence when it came to Chakotay, the Maquis, Chakotay, Starfleet, Chakotay, Maquis, right?
Yeah, because what you're getting at, though, really is sort of this question of hindsight. It's this question of production reality affecting the stories that you're telling. So here they get to spend all this time. They have the luxury of time of crafting a pilot episode like Caretaker, which is so strong in so many ways. But then it's like, oh, well, we've got to stretch this out another 15 episodes for our first season. Then we got to stretch out another 26 every season after that. What do we do? Well, you know essentially the dynamic of the characters with each other, but you also have this directive saying, well, they need to come together as a team. All right, but then you've got writers who aren't there every day because you have a combination of a writing staff, a production staff, and your outside freelancers. Suddenly a better story comes along, like Jetrel, like whatever. They're like, oh, no, let's do this one because it's the better episode. Then you're backtracking to figure out, well, wait, what are the things that we left on the table that we didn't actually explore from before? It's an interesting question because as of our recording now, looking back at Voyager, we're in the throes of Star Trek where the main way it's told is in short serialized seasons.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Very fair point.
So something like this now would be something that would actually carry you through an entire season. You know, it's there's no one right way to make a show. But I think what you're illustrating here is kind of the part of the downfall of just the way TV was written then, because then stuff like this does feel out of order, and it feels like good opportunities were missed.
And I think one of those bigger missed opportunities was consistently showing the Maquis struggling with their identity, because it's obviously there. Let's go all the way back again to Parallax and this one discussion that Janeway and Chakotay had, where Chakotay was really at odds at this stage in their relationship. So I'm sorry, this is actually in this episode. I'm stealing a lot of my own thunder from the end of this episode.
Yeah.
But earlier on, Janeway said it's not fair to expect Starfleet behavior from people who never went to the Academy. Fair point. Tuvok says, okay, what do you propose? What's the solution? Janeway said, we need to bring some of these people up to speed, instruct them on how to run a Starfleet vessel, show them why we do things the way we do, give them an opportunity to feel like they're part of the team. That's not preserving the Maquis identity, which I thought that she was trying to balance. She wanted it to be a Starfleet crew. But Chakotay is like, well, there are certain ways we do things, and Chakotay proved that he could preserve that in Parallax with B'Elanna. So either turn them all Starfleet, let them have the ownership of Starfleet, train them in the way of Starfleet, take those Maquis badges off, basically saying, like, here's my scarlet letter because I'm Maquis.
Right.
And then if I wear this, that means that you're already prejudging who I am and my capabilities because of this freaking pin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Take all those off, let them earn it from non-com up.
Yeah.
And let them get ownership of their own responsibilities. That sounds like the Starfleet way. Any other way aside from that sounds like assimilation.
You took the word right out of my mouth. I kept thinking that is a kind of assimilation. Then how badly does that go? Like, where do we end up a year from now where it's Starfleet 100% of the time, but, you get Maquis Day once a year. Here you go. We're gonna bake a Maquis cake, and we're gonna have the Maquis roast, and we get to sing Maquis songs for one day. Rest of the time, it's a Starfleet.
But and everyone gets a free punch at Chakotay that day.
That's how it works. Yeah. See, you're on board. You know how Maquis Day goes on Voyager. All right, let's talk a little bit about Tuvok and his maybe strengths and weaknesses, glaring weaknesses as a coach, as a teacher, as a trainer here. Really his approach can be summarized by that old directive, the beatings will continue until morale improves. He kind of starts things that way and realizes after a bit of time that isn't exactly the way to go. Now, that line, of course, that it is always tactically correct to sacrifice the few to save the many. Okay, that's a very different line from just getting the tactical advantage, and sort of expressing the idea of saving the crew in order to carry on to fight another day, to actually use your tactical advantage. This is a little more, not necessarily nihilistic, but it is a little cold.
Emotionless?
Yes, a little cold, a little emotionless. Yeah. Because when I hear that and then I come down to this last scene, it's that last moment where Dalby and Tuvok are having their face-off, and you've got Garen, who, by the way, face off has a totally different meaning when we consider poor long-lost Durst. Didn't mean to bring that up. I know, tragic, right? But, and you've got Garen, who is passed out up at that control panel. When they're having that moment, what do you think? Was Tuvok going to save Garen anyway and just wasn't going to take the time to explain his decision to Dalby? Or was he actually prepared to let him die? Because rewatching that scene multiple times, there's not a moment of realization. There's not a moment of changing one's mind. There's just shove Dalby through the Jeffries tube, throw on that door. Could Tuvok have taken the time to say, no, I'm going back for him. It's my duty to protect you. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know. I kept rewatching that moment, trying to figure out where's the point where the character is connecting to what's going on.
You know, this is a great example of, again, TV being made at a certain era, maybe a certain innocent era versus TV or movies that are made now. Because I think at that time, in that moment, is where you would either capture an audience and say, this is a very serious topic that we're talking about. You know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Even if that one is Tuvok or, in this case, Garen, right? So he lets him die. But he said, if I didn't do that, then the three of you wouldn't be alive, and neither would I. You know, it goes, again, all the way back to the example of Styles and Spock. Styles is saying, I can't believe you did this for me. And Spock's like, I didn't do it for you. I did it because tactically the ship is stronger with you than without you. So I think I really do think that not that I wanted that character to die, but there's a learning moment here. Like, the reason why we did all of this is because this is the protocol that you have to follow. Would you rather have one? This is your trolley problem, John. Yeah. Would you rather have this one? And we were sympathetic to, you know, his story because, you know, he was the story that Dalby told about Garen around the pool table.
Sure.
We're sympathetic to this character. We don't want anything to happen to him. But at the same time, though, these are those moments that make episodes far more interesting and memorable when you have that moment, right?
Yeah.
Focused on a character, especially in this case, Tuvok saying, like, what is your solution going to be? And I really wanted Tuvok to have maybe wrestle with that a little bit more emotionally at the end if he let Garen die and say, look, I didn't want this to happen, but it happened. And I would rather save 70 to 80% of the team rather than all of us die because I didn't make that decision. That's the weight of command, right? That's the weight of the responsibility.
Now, the trouble is, you know, you think about the next episode and the next episode and the next one after that. Every single time now, here's Dalby walking down a corridor wanting to punch Tuvok every time he sees him.
He's got to wait for Maquis Day.
He's got...
Right? But so what consequences have we learned? That's my biggest sticking point with Voyager, even up to this episode. It's like, and Henley said this in the mess hall, you know, before Chakotay, you know, punched Dalby. She's like, we can do anything we want. We can be the biggest a-holes on this ship. What are they going to do? Brig us? For how long? Right? So that's my biggest problem. And I had this all the way with State of Flux when, when Maj Kulla's assassin killed, like, the only witness that they had, and nothing happened to him. No brig time, no interrogation, no nothing. Yeah. Right? So if, say, through the course of, you know, Chinese Whispers or the Grapevine, you know, the Maquis hear of this, and like, well, if Janeway and Tuvok aren't going to brig, like, people that murdered their only character witness in an investigation, we can get away with anything we want because they're not going to do anything to us anyway.
Right.
And it gets even deeper than that because Voyager is so lean when it comes to staffing. And this is like looking at it from a real world problem. When you're that lean on staffing and you have specialists can negotiate for a lot when they're the only one as good as they are at their job.
True. Yeah, very true.
And now, what if that person was Maquis?
Yeah.
What if that person was an expert, the only expert in the quadrant on that ship in bio-neural gel packs?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
What do you do?
The BNGPs, you need them. You need them fixed.
Are you going to take them off the job? Of course you're not.
Right.
What are the consequences? So, seriously, like, Tuvok's got the stick.
Yeah.
There's no need for a carrot.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
What lessons does this episode hold for us, aside from the wonders of sweatpants in space?
Well, we've come to the end of our story today, and you know, folks, I like to think that Tuvok learned a little something, and Dalby and his crewmates learned a little something. Most importantly, I hope that we all learned a little something from Learning Curve. So, Norm, it's time to figure out what you and I learned from Learning Curve, and I'll start off in the traditional way with discussing whether or not the episode holds up, and then we'll get into our morals, meanings, and messages. So, Norman, looking at Learning Curve, do you feel like this episode holds up?
So, looking at it from the bell curve, grading it on the bell curve, right? Looking at it from all of the elements involved, I don't like saying this for kind of like the, I don't want to be glib about it, and I don't want it to sound like completely like sanitary, but there's nothing technically wrong with this episode. I don't know like why I find this episode problematic, but technically there's nothing wrong with it. The acting is fine. It's actually in some occasions better than fine. The production is fine. The way that they economize, as you said, like a lot of the shots, and you still had this, understanding that the ship is big, it's vast, it has all these corridors, etc., etc. Everything's fine. But maybe that's the problem that I'm having with this episode. It's that, let me equate this to one of my favorite things I like talking about, and it's bourbon and scotch. When you have a blended, offering in a blended bourbon and blended scotch, it tastes so perfect that you don't trust it. It tastes so smooth that you're like, why is this so smooth? There should be some character, quote unquote, to it. That's how I feel about an episode like this. It just lacks a little bit of that specific character, and maybe that's the way it was for Star Trek back in the 1990s, pre 9/11. There's a certain vanilla-ness to the storytelling. And, it does feel a little out of place. And based on the trivia that you laid down earlier, the curve of learning of your trivia that you had earlier, because of the way that this was chosen as the season finale, it's no real season finale, right? There's no weight to it. There's no gravitas to it. There's no leading into the next season, per se. But I think all of that being said, the biggest issue I have with this episode is it shows the shortcoming of how they've handled Chakotay. Because Chakotay, when given the opportunity, is a fascinating character. Because he literally straddles the fence between two worlds, Maquis and Starfleet. And they wrote him so well in Parallax, which I think this is pretty much kind of like the bookend to that episode. In Parallax, he said to Janeway, if you look at it a certain way, none of my people will have seniority on this ship. And then Janeway said, that's the problem. They're your people, not Starfleet. And Chakotay is wrestling with her this whole time, saying look, you gotta meet me at least halfway.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden, he becomes basically a well-in-line, well-tuned first officer who does Janeway's, quote-unquote bidding as first officer. Make sure the crew morale is okay, make sure your away teams are okay, make sure etc., etc., etc. is okay. Then you have this episode, and he throws that punch. I'm like, that's the Chakotay that I want to see. That's the character that we saw in Parallax that was lost between now and then. And I really do think that that's just an unfortunate situation. So that's where my problem is with this episode. It's fine until they remind you how extraordinary this episode could have been if they actually had maybe a little bit more forethought or pre-planning or etc. I'm not going to criticize for things that happened how was this, 1995?
Yeah.
So there was a certain era of TV, a certain level of production, etc. So I just wish that it had just a little bit more character. That's all. A little bit of spike in the flavor. A little bit of something that was more memorable. Even if it was distasteful, something that was a little bit more memorable. How about you?
So this is what's funny is that I wasn't going to put my notes here because I was going to let you say whatever you're going to say. And then I was just going to come in and the joke was going to say, it's fine. But you, but again, like the meeting of the minds here, you use that word because it is exactly the right word for this episode. There is nothing about this episode that particularly offends or excites. The most exciting moment in this is Chakotay punching a crewman, which, as far as drama goes, works really well. As far as actual workplace etiquette goes, it is wrong. We are missing a scene here where he actually gets dressed down by Janeway, because that would happen at some point. The guest cast are all very good. Mm-hmm. I think Tim Russ, he is a star player in every place that we've seen him in the series so far, even if he has been misused sometimes in those places. But he is always strong whenever he's on screen. And even in an episode like this, where it's about him learning and about him meeting people where they are, it's a little bit different take on how we've seen Vulcans so far in Star Trek, and I really appreciate that, because if you look at like the Kirk, Spock, Bones dynamic, yes, Bones and Spock have their differences, and yes, Kirk and Spock have their tight friendship, but the entire thing is predicated on them having a basic understanding of being in the same boat together, and a basic understanding of Spock's intelligence and the qualities and strengths that he brings to the table. Here we've got somebody that you bring into this, very foreign situation. Well, the ship and the structure of Starfleet are not foreign to him, but having to command people who are absolutely not on the same page with him. Your logic and your training, your adherence to the rules only gets you so far until they don't, So what we want here is the moment of recognition, that learning curve for Tuvok, less so for the trainees, because we know that we're not really going to see those trainees again. We know that they're just there to serve the Tuvok story, right? So then you have to ask yourself, is that worthy of the A plot? Does the B plot actually, I think mercifully the B plot is very short here, because it really is just, we found a virus, we need to give the ship a fever, now the virus is gone. I mean, that's it. It is the thinnest of thin B plots. Thank goodness it's not the A plot. And even trying to make those two stories merge at the end is okay, but it's not great. Again, I'll go back to the word of the day. Fine, but not great, but not exciting. And maybe part of what we needed is, like you're saying, we needed a point of high drama, or we needed even just a problem here that is something we feel like, wow, we could really sink our teeth into. Mm-hmm. So it is unoffensive. It doesn't sort of shake up my view of the series or of Star Trek in general. It just feels like what would have been a show that should have aired, a third of the way into the season. I think that's where it needed to be. This is misplaced. Even then, 7 episodes in, it would have been fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it passes, but just barely. It holds up because the production is running along smoothly. The actors are doing their jobs, but there's nothing here that really will leap out at you and make you, question your existence in the middle of the night.
Well, here's a quick question before we jump into the morals, meanings, and messages. Is there a shift that happened, obviously in us as the viewers, obviously in the world in of itself after the events of 9/11, but there, and especially the way that television or entertainment is produced now, there's such an extremism to the way that television is produced. And the way I say that is there's an extremism in the pacing, the narration, the character development, the production. Everything is very heightened and very sharp. Everything is like in super critical, crystalline focus 100% of the time. We've been conditioned to approach and digest and extrapolate, memorize all of that in a certain way as an audience today. Going back to the pre-9/11 world of the late 1990s, of this is 1995, this episode, is it hard for us to actually see a certain level of innocence and a certain level of saccharine sweetness that was part of that era that we just can't see anymore?
That's a really good question. And I think, though, that part of the answer is that even in the mid-'90s, Star Trek was evolving, for better or for worse. There was the sort of, resolved moral of the week of Next Gen. But Next Gen also went to some difficult places. There was DS9 that was breaking all kinds of new ground, and for as many criticisms as you and I and many of our listeners and many viewers at the time had of DS9, they also realized that was a show that was going to go even heavier, even more pointed in its look at how people live and work together, and when the stakes are different, how do they live up to who they say they are, or not live up to that, as the case may be. And along comes Voyager with this very earnest attempt to return to something that was even more innocent, moral of the week, lesson of the week. I have to feel like, with the thoughtful stories that we've had so far, there's nothing wrong with Voyager going light. There's nothing wrong with Voyager just sort of being a personal journey every now and then. But this one just feels thin. Mm-hmm. That's all. It just feels thin, We're coming off of Jetrel.
That's true. That is true.
Jetrel is Voyager's duet by design. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good thing, Stories that are that good are worth retelling and re-exploring. But we're coming off an episode that maybe they felt at the time, well, they can't really go to comedy. And we're coming up here at the end of the season. We don't really know what the order is going to be. This one's just sort of innocuous.
Right. And I do think that if it weren't for being a season finale, I think we would probably be a little bit more understanding towards the nature of this episode and focusing on just the episode in and of itself, as opposed to this is the end of season 1 of Voyager, the flagship series of the UPN.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because there's that baggage that's associated with this episode too, right?
Definitely. Yeah. So, all right. So it is a thin episode, but are there things to learn, to walk away from this with, to carry into our own learning curve that will affect the rest of our lives? What do you say, Norman?
I think so. I mean, okay, so yes, we've mentioned that, Voyager as a series is a little vanilla, a little sugar-coated. When you actually think about the peril that this ship and crew are in. So the premise is you have a lost ship, you have a captain and a crew that have to depend on each other without fail in order to get home. That's the premise, as set up by Caretaker. 70,000 light years away from home. How do you accomplish this? And this is what I landed on as a moral in this episode. It's about trust. Right? We're looking at it from a trust fall standpoint. If we're to believe that the conceit of this story is real, let's just put that out there.
Sure. Yeah.
And if we are to believe that these characters are, in fact, living and breathing personalities, because we fall in love with our characters and we fall in love with the nuances that make them these personalities.
Yep.
If they're subject to the same physical and emotional stress that trigger us as human beings or as characters, to react in a certain way, you have this organic emotional spectrum of they act a certain way, they behave a certain way. Can we trust the people that we are with? Are we going to be able to trust that their goal is my goal? Is that goal, in this case, what Janeway set out at the very beginning, the premise of Caretaker, is to get home? So, much like the real world, what we have in this episode is when human beings are required, emphasis on required, or forced to, if you would be really honest about it, to interact with each other for one reason or another, whether it's work or school or serving together in the military, etc., etc. Somewhere along the line, something or someone requires us to reach that goal in a very specific way. Their way. In this case, Tuvok's way, or the Starfleet way. The only way the leadership of Voyager trusts or will trust the Maquis is that if they basically reprogram these individuals to become Starfleet trustworthy. Not just human trustworthy, not just crew member trustworthy, but Starfleet trustworthy. That's the problem what I find within this episode. When you remove the agency from people, when you remove their capacity to be able to achieve a goal the way that they are going to achieve it, even if it's different than the way that you want them to do it, the goal in and of itself is what needs to be focused on. That's how you build trust, right? That's how you build relationships with people. That's how you build democracies, to increase the better understanding of the nature of people, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought that Caretaker was going to establish, this individuality that is filtered through Chakotay and then to Janeway. That's what I thought was missing in this episode overall, is how do you get to that level of trust? Did Tuvok learn that? Did he learn to trust any of those trainees that he tried to reforge the Starfleet way, right? So basically, I'm going to sum it all up in one of my favorite albums from Metallica and Justice for All,
right?
Eye of the Beholder, where the lyrics say, doesn't matter what you see or intuit what you read. You can do it your own way if it's done just how I say.
Oh, wow. The wisdom of Metallica nailed this episode. That's awesome, man. That's great.
All right, John, bring us home, buddy. Bring us home.
Look, definitely not as literate as yours quoting Metallica. You know, that old saw that you hear, you feed a cold, you starve a fever, and you sweat out the dangerous virus infecting your bioneural gel packs. That's how you approach this. Yeah, that's how you do it. No, look, being a little more serious with this one. For a lot of things in life, there is no one correct way to proceed. There is no one correct way to interact or to approach a problem. We're at our best when we can adapt to new circumstances and new information. And we can be so rigid in our approach to others that we lose the opportunity to learn ourselves. And the cadets have a nice little journey, but so, most importantly, does Tuvok. That's all very on the surface. It's all very obvious, but that doesn't make the lessons of this episode any less important, any less true. And while we're at it, in the words of Tuvok, don't let fear get the worst of us, as he does in that scene where they're trapped in their cargo bay. His cadets are assuming the worst about what's happening near the end, but all along, people like Dalby are assuming and expecting the worst, no matter what. And again, I go back to one of my favorite lines in this, other than take the cheese to sickbay. This is why I love B'Elanna calling him out and just saying, fine, make it through. That's the lesson that I think I get to take away from this, because things can be falling apart around you, but if you assume that they will only get worse instead of deciding to make it through, then you won't.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com. And for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, the 37s.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers Adam Brusky, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, John Mann, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. Hey everybody, Maquis Day is coming up. Remember to swing by Chakotay's Punch Bowl. It is also spicy. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.